All right, we are ready for our next panel. It's going to be a very interesting one. We're going to bring on two people, Hayden and Phil. Hayden from Uniswap, Phil from Flashbots, and they're going to talk about how we think the future of on-chain trading is going to evolve. So please give them a big round of applause.
Hello. I think our plan was mostly to talk about oil rigs, but we're going to have to pivot.
Yeah. We're going to have to talk about trading on chain and DeFi and L1s. So hopefully y'all are excited about that.
Woo! Some context. I think we both thought we were going to be interviewed, and now we're interviewing each other. But good news is that we happen to have launched something today together, our two companies. Well, actually, I can introduce Hayden from Uniswap, Phil from Flashbots. And together our two teams rolled out flash blocks for Uni Chain today, which is basically giving us 200 millisecond swapping for the first time ever, and so it's been a huge win. I would love to kind of maybe one place to start actually would be curious to hear from you, Phil. Like, what is a TEE? How do you think about it?
Yeah. So I think probably many people in this room already know, but TEs are kind of this really exciting new tech that lets us do all this new privacy and integrity for computation. And I think that's really interesting for ETH for L1s and L2s. So Uni Chain is kind of an L2 trading product looking to have a really good trading UX. Maybe that's one question for you, Hayden, next is like, what is Uni Chain and like what are the design goals? But I think it's been really nice to collaborate with Uniswap Labs and kind of build out this cutting edge tech. It really is on the frontier in many ways of technology. Like there aren't very many widely deployed low latency TE apps out there. You've mostly seen this tech used for kind of ML training and other kind of data privacy things like that. And really having this rigorous data privacy foundation on which we can build trading systems, at least for me, it's like super, super bullish. So I'm glad we managed to work together on it.
Yeah, so I think that the journey of how we came to building Uni Chain, Uniswap started out as this decentralized trading protocol on top of Ethereum and as this very simple interface to trading through that protocol. And I think that like both of those components were actually really key. I think if we just launched the protocol and we never built an interface to make it easy, I don't know if it would have ever gotten adoption. And every step of the way for the past 8 years since then, the journey has been, how can we make this better for users? How can we make it more efficient as a marketplace? We had Uniswap v3. How do we make it easier to onboard and access? And that's really where, for example, our work on our wallet came from. And when it came to building Uni Chain, I think it was just like the next iteration of how can we make Uniswap as not just like a protocol, not just the front end, but like the holistic product of interacting with it as a decentralized exchange. How can we make it better and easier to use for users and have better outcomes for them? And when you look at one intuition for the chain actually comes from our decision to build the wallet. One thing that was starting to happen is that people that sat, or different things that sat between our users and using the protocol were kind of getting in between and making the experience worse. Whether it was the user experience of some of the wallets that most people were using, or whether it was even the way that the business deals those wallets made with private market makers to kind of extract MEV from them. And so having our own wallet helped us kind of be able to provide an experience for our users that improved it. And then I think from here, even the way that blocks are built at a chain level really has a pretty profound impact on our users. One intuition is that something like $1 to $2 billion a year in value is made by MEV searchers and validators through block auctions based on the value that is generated by Uniswap traders. And so Unichain was a project that essentially allowed us to build a chain that really optimized for the use case of Uniswap and trading and DeFi, while still kind of retaining the core value proposition of decentralization on Ethereum.
Yeah, so I guess one interesting point about Unichain, I think one thing we collaborate on a lot is TEs and how to fit this into the sequencer design, into the OP stack, things like that. And at least I consider kind of Unichain kind of a leader in the L2 space, kind of pushing a lot of new research around things like transaction fee policies, MEV redistribution, faster blocks with T guarantees on top. So maybe one question I have for you is like, what made this kind of tech attractive to you, and like, how do you see it as maybe differentiating Uni Chain and like kind of also maybe Ethereum as a whole?
Yeah. So I think that like, when we look at where value, like, I think the tech kind of followed the user needs, right? And so like, we don't look at something and say like, what is like, like what is cool tech? We think like, what do our users need? And what our users needed, one of the things people needed was like lower block times. Lower block times is good for traders because it reduces the time from when the trade is made to when it's executed, which reduces value that leaks from them. It also creates a far better user experience. Lower block times is also extremely good for liquidity providers because liquidity providers, they kind of lose money in some ways off of like price divergence when they're in a position, but then they make money off of all the trades along the way. And so the lower the block time, the more like intermediate arbitrage and trading volume that they're seeing, the more kind of money they can make off of that. And so low block times was good from a price perspective. It was good for liquidity providers, and it just makes it like when people interact with blockchains, I think that one thing that I've been feeling a lot is that to actually grow massively from where DeFi has grown so much from where we were in the early days, but to kind of grow to the next stage, it can't just be like, like decentralization can't be the only benefit. Like you need to kind of meet people where they are in terms of user experience. And so like having something look and feel instant, which I confirmed before I came out stage, like if you use our wallet right now on Uni Chain, the swaps are instant. Like you can't, there's no the number 200 milliseconds didn't come from nowhere. It came from like, that is the rate at which the human eye notices these things, more or less. And so, I think that like the reason that like, and then when it comes to like TEEs and transaction ordering, again, like the whole supply chain of when someone makes a trade to when it's executed is like extremely important. And to us, like, one of the core value propositions of Ethereum was, like sort of like the decentralization and the transparency that can come around it. And when it came to like trying to run this at a greater, in the L2 space, there's often like historically been like a trade-off people make, which is like by moving more execution off-chain, you're able to scale up greater, but then what you lose is often like some of the transparency or the guarantees. And so things like TEs are ways to create better, an example would be like the way that like a sequencer orders transactions. By doing it inside a TEE, we can create like a very strong guarantee around, there's a future thing called flat attestations or something like that.
Yeah, flash attestation.
Flash attestation.
Flash testations.
Flash attestation.
Yeah.
We gotta work on our naming.
Yeah.
But that will give us like a cryptographic proof of the logic that was used to order the block, which can help create better outcomes for users essentially.
Yeah. So making this whole supply chain kind of both verifiable but also faster, it was kind of the design goal from Uni Chain is what I'm hearing. How do you think about that in relationship to like, I guess, the L1 wars? Because like one of the hot Twitter topics these days is like, different chains. What should we do for ETH L1? Should we even have DeFi on L1? How does this T fit into that narrative? Because at least to me, it seems like in some ways, a lot of the ways that other domains and other chains have been able to advertise from a trading perspective is to kind of make claims around latency or UX or something like that. And this, to me, sounds, at least what you've described, is a pretty good UX. You go in your wallet, you press, you get like an instant confirmation your trade is done. Is there anything missing, or how do you think about, I guess, the positioning there?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think that like, the whole like should DeFi be on L1 conversation is an interesting one. And I think that like probably one way to put it is that I don't think that crypto scales by having like a single monolithic chain. Like I think that like one really like funny pattern that I repeatedly see in the world is people being like, we need something to decentralize. How do we create a single thing that is the most decentralized version of it? And it's like, actually, I think the way you decentralize is you have many versions of the thing that kind of have some, and then they all come together, right? And that, like when you look at like how the internet scaled, the internet didn't scale by having like one globally owned computer. It came by having like many computers that could talk to each other. And so I think when you think about even like the value proposition that Ethereum's trying to bring to the world. It's like this like maximally decentralized version of Blockspace, and I think that's extraordinarily valuable. And I think that things like Uni Chain, for example, can leverage that. Right. Uni Chain posts its data to Ethereum L1, but putting every single part of every single computation on a single, if the goal of Ethereum is to have be able to run on a single node, then you're inherently not going to be able to run every piece of computation in all society on it. And so I think that figuring out how you can kind of leverage different pieces, different tools to kind of and have them, have them all kind of come together using standard, interfacing, like standard, there's a kind of a reason that computers can talk to each other and information can kind of seamlessly flow through them. It's because we have standard information sharing protocols and standard formats for representing data. And I think kind of what we're doing in DeFi is just that for value. But the internet has many servers and they're optimized for different use cases. And I kind of see that playing out here. But generally speaking, part of the value proposition of DeFi is the decentralization of it. And so we just have to figure out how to make many of these different pieces decentralized in their own right. And so I think things like TEEs give us the ability to give us some of the benefits of Ethereum while not using every single piece of computation in one place.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So one of the reasons I think Flashbots is super excited about TEEs from a trading context is once you start looking at how do you secure a trading protocol, I mean, let's even say we both want to participate in a dark pool. And you want to do that from maybe a technical rather than a legal perspective. That's kind of the ambition of DeFi, right? It's we can do this technical stuff. It'll be way more efficient. It'll be way better. Well, you have all these privacy tools at your disposal. A lot of them even let you program them in various ways, only give you privacy in various conditions or use the privacy to kind of leverage your information in certain ways. But then there's many different ways to actually do these things. So there's MPC, FHE, many kind of technical objects that will let you achieve this computational privacy that's super useful for trading. I think TEEs are a really interesting trade-off point because they give you kind of a lot of integrity and privacy properties almost for free. They're almost as fast as just running the thing on a server. Rather than some of these other protocols, which maybe require back and forth communication between parties or parties in the servers. So in some ways, I think what you said about the internet topology is super interesting. We can kind of, using TEEs, iterate to mirror that because the computational kind of workload profile is very similar. Yeah, I also want to say one interesting thing, which your answer made me think of. It's I think DeFi is actually in a very special place right now. We've actually built up a lot of the infrastructure that's been promised, really since 2017, I would say, when things really started popping off and the hype really started blowing up. And we have these exchanges, these trading systems that run at internet scale across the world, with many of them with fairly good UXs and different trade-off guarantees, many of them with rigorous technical notions of privacy that don't exist on Wall Street and TradFi. So I think we should maybe once in a while also take a moment to recognize that we're in a pretty special place in kind of the history of finance. Yeah, that's my rant. I'll leave it to you to rant or ask me questions. But
yeah, I do agree. I think that DeFi has come so far so quickly. I remember when Uniswap initially launched in 2018. I think the word was only just begun to be being used for the first time. MakerDAO had recently launched, Compound launched in the same month as Uniswap, and the word DeFi kind of became a thing just 7, 8 years ago. And now it's kind of currently being hotly debated in DC for a law that's how do we carve out the language to make sure that the rules that apply to centralized systems are not the same as for decentralized ones. And that's it's kind of a crazy trajectory. And there's Uniswap in the past 5-ish years has processed $3.5 trillion in trading, and it's kind of operated at a pretty insane scale. And I think that part of that is it's not really possible without the sort of technical there's sort of a scale that you could reach with decentralization that is pretty insane. We kind of put this thing out into the world, and then the fact that anyone could integrate with it, anyone could build on top of it, and sort of there was sort of one kind of angle that I sometimes think about it is almost you compare Uniswap, the protocol as a product relative to things like Twitter or things like Reddit, where Twitter and Reddit are two very massive internet companies that I guess X now, but massive internet companies that like had these like really powerful APIs, and then both of them basically shut down their APIs at different times to like because either they didn't like some of the things people were building on top of the API, or they wanted to compete with the companies that were building on their own APIs, or they felt like it was like the business optimal thing to do. And the kind of idea that you can like build on top of something like the Uniswap protocol, and combined with Uni Chain and Ethereum to like create an application that like in some ways can't be rugged. Like I don't have the ability to kick someone off of off of Ethereum. I don't have the ability to kick someone off of Uniswap. So there's sort of like this notion of like, and because of that, people can actually build on top of it like dramatically lowers the risk and makes it like a better counterparty. And I think that's kind of like generally the thing when you think about like how crypto will kind of interface with the broader world. I think that like people like the reason I think one of it's like structural, like one of the inherent advantages that I think will help DeFi platforms win or like gain much greater adoption is just that nature, which is like people will want to use them because they know if they can never lose access to their like the assets within them, or they will, or if they're a developer, they want to build on them because they know that they'll always be able to kind of self-serve their own interfaces with it. So I just find that like a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's almost like an unstoppable application, I guess, in
Yeah.
some ways. Yeah, I'm curious, like one interesting thing I was meditating on a few days ago. So this is kind of like a, I guess, founder journey, at least panel or conference or whatever, right? And you just kind of mentioned, and I agree that in many ways we have DeFi going mainstream. Like we're discussing it in Washington. We have like really big conferences around the world. We have many kind of institutions, quote unquote, getting in. That's kind of not how things were when we started working on these things, I would say. I don't know. Do you see any kind of unique challenges of that? Because at least for me, like thinking about some of these issues like privacy. Okay, we're going to have programmable privacy. It's going to let us build super efficient trading systems. That seems great, but also like in some ways we as a community are maybe going to be in the center of conversations about like how does privacy impact the world, and like how far should we really go with these technologies, and who should and shouldn't run them. So I don't know. I guess my broad thing is like, do things also feel different for you now that they're more mainstream? Because at least for me, some of these things feel higher stakes.
Yeah, I think that's right. They definitely feel higher stakes. At the same time, I think that like it's sometimes it still feels like we're like early. Like we got it. Like DeFi got so big so fast. It's kind of crazy. And definitely like the risk is always like dilution in the like the values or like. But I think the thing that I like keeps me pretty optimistic about it is just that like there's like this like fundamental. I kind of like compare it against the internet pretty often, right? Like what did the internet do for the world? The internet basically democratized access to information. Most information now is on the internet. It's mostly digitized. It's because by representing information in standard formats and in this place, it kind of is instantly global and accessible to more people. And I think that like there's this like inherent nature to some of the technology where it's like we can build like I think what like DeFi is trying to do is to democratize access to the creation of markets, to access to markets, to the kind of transmission of value, to make it like most value is available kind of instantly globally, and certainly that puts it in like the center of certain things, and agree there's like challenges to it, but like I think that like I don't know, like I don't think any like no one will argue that the internet was purely a good thing. No one will say the internet has only done good things in the world, but I think most people think that the internet is like overall like democratizing or expanding of access, and I think that like that's like there's like a similar nature to the technology we build. At least from my perspective.
I think it's an interesting question. I was actually discussing this with someone at the ETH Foundation yesterday at dinner. I won't dox them, Chatham House, but they had asked me something like for the block building market and how blocks are produced and kind of trades are reconciled in these systems. How decentralized do I see it being in like 10 years? And my answer was kind of like, I don't know, 10 years to me feels like a short time in some ways, because I also love comparing things to the internet. It's like a little cringe, but I think it actually does work and it's true. And so I stand by it as well. And so I was like, look, compared to the internet, right? That was invented in like the 70s, really, and really didn't go to everyone's house until like kind of the early 90s. And at that point, you had this big explosion, a lot of capital, these hype bubbles. Every company that was built was being built, et cetera. That was already 30 years ago. We've seen like several waves of business models come and go, a lot of nation state politics come and go. But at least for me, like it feels like on the internet, the jury is still out. Like whether we end up in like a totalitarian kind of controlled internet environment where things increasingly break into fiefdoms, where nation states kind of concentrate this power, or whether maybe the internet pushes these social forces more towards something decentralized and like cooperative. That's at least my kind of better world. I think it's still an open question. So I don't know. I'm just kind of meditating on the fact that I think things often happen slower than we want them to, and I'm hoping maybe crypto can help the internet stay decentralized and make sure there's enough need for cooperation among all these parties that we don't lean into our own kind of fiefdoms and nationalism and things like that.
Yeah, the jury still out thing is like it's true. Like there is like a lot of ways that, like society can evolve from here. I think at the same time like there is like something nice, which is a lot of people have like can kind of look up anything and send anything. But yeah, I do see the point there. One thing I'm kind of actually speaking of like kind of like founder journeys and maybe context for the room. Me and Phil have known each other for a very long time. We first met almost a year before Uniswap launched, and Phil was like a PhD student doing research on what later became known as MEV, but was before the term MEV was made up, and and I was working on Uniswap, and I think that like the early day, I kind of am curious to hear how you think about like AMM, like AMM market structure, because I remember in the early days you had a lot of concerns around it and how it could potentially leak value or whatever. And then I'm kind of curious. Very recently saw you tweeted that you thought AMM market structure would replace all order books forever. So I'm kind of curious about that journey and how you think about automated market making and kind of expanding. To me, it's part of the story of like it's like automated market like. Right now, it's just like in the traditional financial world, it's so hard to create an asset, and then like YouTube made it like the same way like it's like harder to create a Netflix documentary than it is to create a YouTube video. And to me, automated market making is partially about like doing that for financial markets. But I'm curious your take on it.
Yeah, my take is actually a slightly different angle, which I think is fun. So yes, I did tweet that I think AMMs will dominate all trading. For everyone's context, I like to make like fairly aggressive predictions about the future. Some of them are wrong, some of them are right. So take it with a grain of salt. But the reason I think that actually originally came about as like a technical one, and it kind of relates to something you said earlier. You were talking about how decentralization kind of fueled the adoption of Uniswap because people could kind of deploy things, they could deploy assets, things like that. That kind of brought me to like some meme that we've been playing with internally, which is basically MEV as like possibly thinking of it as a scaling technology. So like how your chain processes and handles its MEV actually determines like what transactions and what state get made to kind of have the economic output that you want. And in some ways, I think what you said made me think, okay, maybe decentralization is also a scaling technology, and we haven't kind of framed that the right way for people, where they think there's this conflict between, okay, you can scale on a centralized server, or you can have this like slow, clunky, decentralized thing. Maybe that's actually not the case, and decentralization is a scaling technology. So to relate that to AMMs, I think when you think about just efficiency and you think about trading, okay, you want TPS, you want efficiency. Those are like the first order UX requirements of trading. I think just as a pure technical object, if you think about like draw a picture of a order book as a machine with like all of the state entries it needs to update in the C program, and like the way it kind of finds and reconciles the trades and kind of the execution process and the confirmation, and then draw a picture of like the simplest AMM that you can draw, and like the AMM picture is just like a lot more aesthetically pleasing. From a technical perspective, if you have like the simplest AMM, which is like the V2 style, like 2-variable AMM, you can fit the entire kind of context needed to execute that inside like a CPU cache, which is inherently like a faster level. It's a more compressed level of memory, because instead of compressing the state of the world down to like this order book object, which can be almost infinitely large, fairly unbounded, you're compressing it to this very kind of bounded amount of data. And actually all these transactions and this MEV and this block building that's essentially happening on top is compressing this data just into a very efficient final state output. So for me, this just aesthetically feels like obvious as a computer scientist. It's just a better way to do it, and unless like you can come up with something really compelling that's like, just like, okay, now order books have this, which is better. I haven't seen any argument like that. Um, I think probably the next wave of things we'll see in AMM market structure specifically. Well, there's one that I'm hoping for and one that I think we'll actually see first. So the one I'm hoping for is kind of better maybe interoperability and just cross-domain notions of AMM trading. So things like how do we consider Uni on L1 interacting with Uni Chain L2, which is giving this very nice fast trading UX. That's a problem that I really care a lot about. But I think in terms of what the market wants, like it's kind of more like the hyperliquid degen thing, right? And like I think the reason like people like Clobs even have any oxygen in this conversation is people just haven't built like the right degen front ends for AMMs in some way. But that was kind of the justification in the tweet. It's a fairly spicy, and it's more of a technologist than an economic take. But
Yeah, that actually makes sense. I think from a I would kind of be remiss to not at this point mention a little bit of like the interplay between the Uniswap protocol and Unichain, and kind of like how they can sort of fit together in a mutually beneficial way, which is like and it kind of like we have this system of fair ordering using TEs for the transactions. One general important part to AMMs is that like liquidity providers are able to kind of sort of be profitable, and there's sort of like this like in some ways when you see like a lot of value leak from LPs to arbitrageurs, it's like not, it's usually like a sign that like the market could be improved, at least from my perspective. Yeah, but one thing that like is very interesting is that in some ways by having this like by doing the fair ordering in a TEE and then having that like having information from that accessible at runtime, basically when the trade is actually executed in a block, liquidity providers in some ways like sometimes it's like the reason that arbitrageurs can make money off liquidity providers is you have these slower blocks, and then you have people that have real-time off-chain information that are trading into those slower blocks, and they can kind of like benefit from that latency in information. But by basically having the auction happen and then have that accessible within the chain, you can actually, liquidity providers, for example, can use that information to update their prices right before the trades execute. And so like a simple example, Uniswap v4 gives us programmable pools that can do things like dynamic fees. We haven't even mentioned Uniswap v4, I don't think yet, but recent version of the Uniswap protocol that's pretty cool, and more customizable. But one thing it gives us is like things like you could have a custom fees, and then what you could do is you could use the priority price, for example, paid in the TE auction as an input information to liquidity providers that they can use to like update their prices, and in that way, if someone trading against a liquidity provider is actually taking a lot of value from them, that would be represented in the TE auction, which then the LP could be like, actually, pay me a little bit more. And so you can sort of like kind of converge these different elements together to create, like the best version of Uniswap. And I think that's kind of gets at the like different types of block space. You have L1, DL2. Is like I think that like block space inherently can specialize, and so I think that like having block space that is specialized to like really improve automated market making and improve DeFi is like an inherently useful thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's an interesting perspective, kind of wrapping it in an Oracle construction. And I kind of think this is like the next generation of AMM market structure. It's like, how can we take all these primitives we have, this technology, TEs, it lets us share information among untrusting parties. It lets us build blocks in like very fast, efficient ways. We're doing this on kind of all these different domains. Uni is running on all these different domains. How do we now leverage all of this infra to like work really, really well together? But I think there are kind of many, many points that we can do that at, including, like you said, the kind of price data side and maybe even liquidity sharing. Who knows like what the future holds. So I think I'm very excited about all those innovations, and like the beautiful part about the AMM is like from the chain's point of view, it almost compresses all of that like very intense and very like specific to the flow, like computation, into a very, very nice state update. So I'm bullish. I think we have 40 seconds left for closing thoughts. I will say, try Uniswap with Flashblocks in your wallet. It's very efficient and should be the best DeFi trading experience, on-chain right now, probably, I would imagine. Like, I don't know, I haven't tried it yet, so I have to do that also.
Yeah.
It just went live today. I've been on a plane.
I tried it backstage right before coming out to confirm. But yeah, it's 200 milliseconds when you swap on Uni Chain, and which makes it feel instant. And it feels really good because this has been something that's been plaguing us for a long time. That like just latency of using blockchains. So we can end it there. And yeah, it was great being up here with Phil, my good friend.
Great to see you, Hayden.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, always happy to chat about Flashblocks, Uniswap, Teas, anything offline. You can find one of us.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.